Ramesses II, which means Ra is the one who bore him. Wow, that's a big statement. Remember, his grandfather was called Ramesses and his father Seti's now called him Ramesses. He was the third king of the 19th dynasty, the son of Seti I and the grandson of Ramesses I. So he comes from this real big military caste, and that family was probably involved with the army for hundreds of years. Ramesses ruled Egypt for around about 66 to 67 years. It's believed that he came to the throne when he was a late teenager, sort of 18, 19, which means he died when he was about 80 or 90 years of age. Ramesses chose for his throne name Yusa marked Ra, the truth and justice of Ra. And also another epic which was included with his throne name was Setepen Ra, chosen by Ra. So it's the truth and justice of Ra, chosen by Ra. Wow. He was crown prince from the age of 14. It's most likely that he took part in military campaigns with his father Seti I, but he was set to father's buildings projects. Remember the Amenhotep III, hypostyle hall at Karnak, finishing off his father's temple to Osiris at Abydos. Also on the west bank of Thebes was Seti I's mortuary temple. Now when Ramesses was at Abydos, there was a small chapel to his grandfather Ramesses I, and he enlarged it and sort of usurped it for himself. While he was there, why not use the workforce? So you can see these beautiful reliefs of a temple dedicated to Osiris, Ramesses I and Ramesses II. Always think that's quite amusing. Ramesses II as the soldier. In year 2 of his reign, so it would have made him 18, 19 years of age, he fought against the sea pirates, the Shurdan, who were affecting coastal trade from Byblos to Egypt. So he set an ambush, which was lots of Egyptian freight carriers, which the sea pirates attacked for booty, and then he sent his navy out there to kill them all. That was his first military engagement, was overseeing this battle of these sea pirates. So he's aged about 23, 24, he campaigns into Canaan up to Byblos. So Canaan was being stirred up by the Hittites, freedom, all this sort of business, and Ramesses had to go in there and squash it all. Year 5, so he was about 24, 25 years of age then. It's the first battle at Kadesh, and there were 4 divisions in Ramesses II's army. You had the Amun, Seth, Ra and Ptah divisions. So as the story goes, Ramesses was in the head of the Amun division, and they marched on to set up camp. The Ra division was behind them and got attacked by the Hittites, who then started attacking the camp of Amun, which is where Ramesses was in. The Ptah division was just emerging from the forests that they'd been travelling through. There's no mention of the Seth division, but what happened was Ramesses found that his camp was surrounded by the Hittites, cavalry and ground troops, and he had to act quick, so he decided to fight his way out. What saved him was that he had a division of mercenaries called the Nahin, and also the mercenaries from the sea pirates raid were in his army now, and they had sailed up the coast of Byblos and came overland, and luckily enough they appeared on the battlefield in time to save Ramesses II. So what could have been a disaster turned into a victory, a survival. The following day the two armies met head to head, and there was no decisive outcome, just lots of dead people. You know, Why don't we talk over our problems? Why do we have to fight all the time? There you go. We haven't learned anything in 40,000 years of history, have we? Anyway, so that was the first battle of Kadesh. So after the Battle of Kadesh, which was in year 5, there was a couple of years of peace, but then the Hittites started stirring everything up again, creating revolts in Canaan. Now, that to me is quite interesting, because this is the third Syrian campaign to quell this. But let's look at the Hittites and their culture. They had a fortified city in modern day Turkey. Now, it didn't have any agricultural land to support that city. It didn't have any rivers running by. It was a fortress. So these Hittites, these people, moved into that part of Turkey. They built a fortress and they went out and dominated their neighbours. So this is a culture based on warfare. They had a code of law which, if you broke, resulted in one punishment: death. So complete intolerance of people's needs. You had to obey or die. And these are the people who are stirring up freedom results in Canaan. What were the Canaanites thinking of? At least under Egyptian rule, they only had to pay a small tribute once a year and they had peace. But they started to revolt in year 7. So straight in there with the army, crushed the revolt and came home. In years 8 and 9, so we got a 3-year war, he's about 30 years of age, and it's more trouble in modern day Syria. So he pushes up past Kadesh to Tunip, the city of Tunip, lays siege, out come the ladders, over the walls. They captured Tunip, and no one had captured that city since the times of Thutmose III, 150 years earlier. So Ramesses, in many ways, was buying into the historical lineage of the great soldiers of ancient Egypt. In year 10, back into Syria. This time the city of Darpur is causing problems. Siege, ladders, captured the city. So when you look at these campaigns into Syria, they attack these cities, they capture them, take prisoners, they take goods, and then they withdraw from Syria. So Amaru for them was not a place that they felt that they could occupy. Interested in was weakening the Hittites' strength in that area. They were trying to grind them down with troops and weaken them by taking resources in that area which could be denied to the Hittites. What is interesting is what Ramesses II is lacking here is intelligence, because from the capital of the Hittites in Turkey to get down to places like Tunip, they had to go through a pass. Well, from October, the snows started falling in that pass, and by the end of October, they were completely blocked. So there was no way the Hittites could conduct warfare in Amaru, or modern day Syria, until those snows melted the following spring. If Ramesses II knew that, which it doesn't appear that he did, or maybe it wasn't on his agenda, he could have conquered the whole of Syria. Well, let's say he did conquer the whole of Syria. Who's sitting on the doorstep next to Babylon and the Hittites? The Assyrians. So they're another problem. So I don't think it was ever the Egyptians' intention to capture and settle in Amuru, modern day Syria, simply because there were too many hostile forces there. And in many ways, that had always been a troublesome area. What the Egyptians are looking for is to keep those trade routes open, so that the trade is coming in and out of Egypt, going up and down the River Nile. That's what they're interested in. Their buffer zone is the retinue, is Canaan. That's their buffer zone. They will defend that buffer zone. But the rest of it beyond, they're just troublemakers. And even if you captured those troublesome princes in their fortified cities, you've then got to contend with Babylon, the Mitannies. You've got to contend with the Assyrians. You've got to contend with the Hittites. So nothing but problems. So that year 10 campaign, we see 11 years of peace. So the buffer zone has been established, which is Canaan, the retinue, and beyond Armuru is just really left to the Hittites and the Babylonians, which are the Mitannies, of course, and the Assyrians to sort out. But it seems to be 11 years of peace, and that's because there were some uprisings in the Hittite Empire themselves. There was lots of uncles, head of the army, and the head of the army was an uncle, and his nephew tried to have him assassinated, and he fled to Egypt. So there was a lot of there were loads of problems in the Hittite Empire, which is maybe why there was this 11 years of peace. By year 21, the Hittites and the Egyptians enter into a treaty of goodwill, of trade, of recognising their borders, and that seems to be the end of the conflicts. The Mitannies did invite Ramesses to go to war with the Hittites after year 21, but they refused. They were happy. The people were prosperous. Trade was flowing in and out of Egypt. They were getting tributes off of their buffer states, the Canaanite towns, and that peace would endure. The other military campaigns or skirmishes, more than anything, were the poor old Cushites. This is why I think there was an organised, civilised society there thousands of years ago, because they didn't like Egyptian occupation. The Egyptians are there for the gold mines. Maybe they didn't care enough for the Cushites, and the Cushites felt all these people want is gold, and they're not interested in developing our landscape, developing our culture. So maybe that's why there were always these revolts against the Egyptian rule in the land of Kush. They put down a revolt in Kush. There were also the Libyan raiders. Remember, they always came in from the desert. Now they're interfering between Canaan and Libya along the coast. So they're raiding those areas along the coast. So they had to be dealt with. So those are they're mentioned on the various temples that Ramesses II built. Now remember, when you become king of Egypt, you have to go through a Hebsed festival at Memphis. So you raise a column, a djed pillar, to represent stability throughout the land. You rise in the red pavilion with the red crown. You rise in the white pavilion with the white crown. You rise in the third pavilion where both crowns, white and red, are joined together. That was demonstrating the Nebtawi, the Lord of two lands. 30 years later, a king had to prove that he was fit enough to rule Egypt. So during the Hebsed, there was an athletic trial as well, not just a ceremonial thing to go through, rituals and stuff. You had to run a course, north, south, east and west, shooting the arrows, proving your athletic ability. Well, by this time, Ramesses is in his 40s or creeping towards 50. Yeah, I'm 61 doing insanity workout, so maybe he was okay doing that athletic part. But for some of the senior kings in the past, they seem to have employed athletes to do it on their behalf. Now, why am I saying that? Well, probably the year 30 said festival was okay for Ramesses, but he had another 12 or 13 of these festivals After that, one every 2 years, then another one every 3 years, etc. So when you're creeping towards sort of 70, having to do these things without a public health service to look after you. Remember, medicine is just developing at that time, and it's the Greeks invented modern medicine. The Egyptians were just playing with magical spells to make you better if you had real heavy problems. And by that time, Ramesses has got a problem with arthritis. He's got abscesses in his mouth and that sort of thing. So he was probably a bit grumpy and unfit, probably after the fifth Hebsed. It demonstrates during the latter part of his kingship is the peace and stability for the people of Egypt. So he was the good shepherd. So remember, the king has two symbols of power: the shepherd's crook, which shows that the people of Egypt are like a flock of sheep, and he is the good shepherd looking over that flock. The other one is the flail, the whip, the herdsman's whip, because the people are portrayed as a herd of cattle, and the king is the good herdsman looking after his herd. Both animals are valuable. So that's the value of the Egyptian people at that time. They are valuable. He is the living Horus. He is there, the inheritor of Osiris, to look after the people of Egypt and to be the intermediary between Egypt and the gods. So he's certainly achieving that in his reign.